In tonight's Government Insider, streamlining IT procurement. Leading commercial companies use strategic sourcing when it comes to purchasing technology, giving them more bang for their buck. How can agencies leverage that same buying power? For insight, we turn to our guest tonight on Capitol Insider, Tim DiNapoli, Director of Acquisition and Sourcing Management Issues with the Government Accountability Office. Tim, agencies spend billions in IT every year, but in 2012, the GAO found the money could be spent more efficiently. Take us back. What issues did government face in IT procurement then?
Well, Morris, 4 years ago when we were talking about IT procurement, especially with regard to strategic sourcing, it was in its infancy. Agencies were just taking baby steps toward trying to do what the private sector has done for decades. So at that time, we did a report that looked at 5 major federal agencies that accounted for nearly 80% of the federal procurement dollars, and we found that less than 5% of their contract dollars were being spent through strategic sourcing approaches, which is insignificant in the whole scheme of things.
Since then, agencies have been asked to strategically source their IT. What does that mean? Give us a few examples of the strategic sourcing.
Well, what strategic sourcing really means is just becoming a smarter buyer. And when you think about the federal government, there are thousands of contracting offices across the country that buy mostly locally. And so what happens is that as a contracting officer, as a program manager, I'm going to go out and buy, in this case, IT services. And I'm looking to get a competition and bring in contractors that meet my needs. And they do that based on individual requirements, individual needs, individual processes. What strategic sourcing says is, let's not do it as individuals. Let's do it as a corporation, or in the federal government, let's do it as an agency. So by using data to figure out what we're buying, who we're buying it from, what kind of requirements we have, maybe we can consolidate our requirements and just be a little smarter in how we buy things.
Now, here's a big task that you had. The GAO was asked to review the IT procurement process for the Defense Department. Were any improvements made from the initial 2012 report?
So we were very pleased to find that actually there has been a significant amount of progress made in the past 3 years. In part, that was due to agencies, including DoD, and we also looked at Homeland Security as well as NASA. They all appointed accountable officials to lead strategic sourcing efforts. They also established program offices that were responsible for kind of guiding the strategic sourcing efforts within their agencies, and established policies and procedures that provided a fairly good framework for which agencies can operate. So for one measure, I think we found in DoD that instead of 5%, which is what they were doing back in 2012, it was between 10 and 27% for IT services. So some progress made, but more can be done.
Tim, this latest report showed these agencies manage between 10 and 44% of the IT services through strategic spending. For private companies, that number is much higher. Why is strategic sourcing hard to accomplish?
Well, Morris, private companies usually manage between about 90% of their procurement dollars through strategic sourcing. So as you mentioned, between 10 and 47%, which was DHS, you manage their procurement through strategic sourcing. So there's a long way to go to reach that level of the private sector. And I think it boils down to a fear of loss of control. We are very risk averse in the government. And so when you think about strategic sourcing, it's not doing something that you're giving to the agency more power, more authority to make sure that they can get, from IT services, they can get the goods and needs that we need overall. But you're wondering, as a contracting officer in a local command, will I get the guy I need? Will I get the service I need? I have unique requirements. What if I don't meet my requirements? So there's a lot of risk aversion in the government, and the key to any successful strategic sourcing effort is to make sure that the agency does a very good internal scan, know what my agency buys, know what my requirements are, so I can meet those requirements. Because if you don't meet requirements, then a strategic sourcing effort, even if you save dollars, is doomed to failure.
I understand everybody wants to be cautious, but what more do agencies need to do to improve their IT procurement?
Well, that progress made, which was good, could be better if they continue to follow the path of leading commercial companies. So they established officials, accountable officials, they established program offices, but here's a couple things that they didn't do, at least didn't do consistently. So they didn't do a spend analysis, which takes a look at that data that cuts across the agency to figure out where their opportunities are. They didn't establish, when they came up with a preferred strategic sourcing contract, they didn't establish policies that said for their people, consider or use the strategic sourcing contract. So we found hundreds of contracts that were outside of the strategic sourcing realm. They didn't measure how much dollars were going through their preferred strategic sourcing contracts, and they didn't establish savings goals and metrics, because you need to demonstrate benefits to your people, otherwise they won't use them.
It's always good to hear from the Government Accountability Office. Tim DiNapoli, Director of Acquisition and Sourcing Management Issues at the GAO. Thanks again, Tim.
Thank you, Morris.